Support for OutFront comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Home plays a big role in your life. That's why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. It lets you apply simply and understand the entire mortgage process fully, so you can be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/OutFront.
OutFront next, breaking news. The president's chief of staff admitting the Mexican government will not, after all, pay for Trump's wall. John Kelly also saying behind closed doors today that some of Trump's campaign promises on immigration were, quote, uninformed. And the president already bragging about his cognitive test scores, saying that's why he is the president that can deal with North Korea. Plus more breaking news. The White House working behind the scenes, trying to limit testimony to Russia investigators. Let's go out front. Good evening. I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news. It's official. The White House tonight admits that the Mexican government will not directly pay for Trump's wall. You heard me. And you don't just have to listen to me say it. I will let you hear John Kelly, the president's chief of staff, say it, as he did just moments ago.
In one way or another, it's possible that we could get the revenue from Mexico, but not directly from their government.
Okay. That is a break of a signature promise, one repeated almost daily on the campaign trail.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words. It'll be a great wall. Mexico's going to pay for the wall. Mexico is going to pay for the wall. Mexico will pay for the wall. And Mexico's going to pay for the wall, and they understand that. Mexico is going to pay for the wall. Believe me, 100%. And who's going to pay for the wall? Who's going to pay for the wall? Who?
You. All right. Kelly today, not just admitting that, right, that obviously the Mexican government isn't going to directly pay for the wall. He is now saying, and he said behind closed doors to lawmakers, that the president has, quote, evolved. And moments ago on the president's favorite television network, here is what Kelly said.
He has changed the way he's looked at a number of things. He's very definitely changed his attitude towards the DACA issue and even the wall.
DACA and the wall. Kelly's comments are coming on those two crucial points as a government shutdown looms over those 2 points. A shutdown that, frankly, the White House today says Democrats are to blame for.
The president certainly doesn't want to shut down. And if one happens, I think you only have one place to look, and that's to the Democrats, who are holding our military and our national security hostage by trying to push through other policies that have nothing to do with the budget.
She is referring by those policies to the Dreamers, to DACA. But she's wrong on a crucial point here. It isn't just Democrats. There are Democrats and now some Republicans tonight who are demanding that resolving the fate of the estimated 700,000 Dreamers must be part of a deal to avoid a government shutdown. And frankly, the president, with his evolved views, seemed to be on board just a week ago. You remember that? The scene that you see on the screen? That was the bipartisan negotiation session at the White House. It was televised for nearly an hour, sitting between Democratic leaders, obviously chosen for the statement. Trump talked about the need for everyone to put hatred aside and come together, and said that they were very close to a deal on DACA and immigration reform.
This should be a bipartisan bill. This should be a bill of love. Truly, it should be a bill of love, and we can do that.
A bill of love. And Trump went so far as to say that if Democrats and Republicans came up with a bill, he was on board with whatever it was.
When this group comes back, hopefully with an agreement, this group and others from the Senate, from the House, comes back with an agreement, I'm signing it. I mean, I will be signing it. I'm not going to say, oh, gee, I want this or I want that. I'll be signing it.
That was last Tuesday. Of course, it was just 2 short days later that the meeting came, heard around the world. The same president went from a bill of love to S-hole, questioning why the United States was taking people from S-hole countries in Africa in. So whatever caused Trump's change of heart, it seems to have happened very quickly. Here's how a very perplexed Senator Lindsey Graham, who attended both of those meetings with Trump, describes the about face.
By the time we got there, something had happened. So Tuesday we had a president that I was proud to golf with, call my friend, who understood immigration had to be bipartisan. You had to have border security. It's essential you have border security with a wall, but he also understood the idea that we had to do it with compassion. Now, I don't know where that guy went. I want him back.
Now, the White House has insisted that Trump was not swayed by immigration hardliners and that he's the one, quote, running the show. But if he is running the show, he has managed to leave the Senate Majority Leader completely in the dark.
I'm looking for something that President Trump supports, and he's not yet indicated what measure he's willing to sign. As soon as we figure out what he is for, then I would be convinced that we were not just spinning our wheels.
As soon as we figure out what he is for. That is from the Republican Majority Leader. I mean, it's a pretty stunning thing to say about his president. And now, adding to the confusion, the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, telling members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus today that Trump was, quote, uninformed about some immigration issues during the campaign. So, Mr. President, if you are running the show, what is your position? Every hour, every minute now counts as the shutdown looms. And Jeff Zeleny is out front tonight at the White House. And Jeff, Senator McConnell says they have not figured out what the president is for, which is really one of the most stunning things, actually, if you just take a moment to think about that. Does the president know what he's for?
Erin, that certainly was a very blunt message from the Republican Senate Majority Leader. Again, the Republican Senate Majority Leader. The House Speaker Paul Ryan said a similar thing early in the day. What is going on here on immigration? There simply is a vacuum of leadership. No one is taking the lead here. And to be fair, Senator McConnell is also trying to avoid a bit of the spotlight here by saying it's basically up to the president. So at the end of the day here, as this week moves along, as the shutdown approaches, potential shutdown, no one is leading on immigration. Now, we do know the president's principles. He said he wants some kind of a wall. Of course, we heard from the chief of staff. Mexico will not pay for it, as the president has indicated several times that they would. But the fact of a wall simply is now more of a barrier in some places. They also want an end to chain migration, an end to the visa lottery system, and dealing with the DACA issue in some fashion. But there have been no specifics about what the president would sign. Of course, a week ago, he said, I'll take the heat. I'll sign anything. That, of course, changed very quickly. So at the end of the day here, the Republican president, the Republican Speaker of the House, the Republican Senate Majority Leader are still not all on the same page because the Republican Party is still divided over this issue. Democrats are saying that they're going to hold fast here and not vote for the spending plan. So what we have is a 48-hour mess here, once again, starting another year in Washington, Erin. All
right. Thank you very much, Jeff Zeleny. And out front now, I want to go to Democratic Congressman Adriano Espaillat. He's a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and was with John Kelly, the Chief of Staff, today. Let me start by asking you, Congressman, your response to what he just said moments ago in that interview. A pretty significant admission, right? He's saying the president has evolved on the wall. But what he actually said there in terms of admitting that the Mexican government would not directly pay for it, that is a massive admission. It's an admission of fact that we all know, but it is not something that the president has admitted to. How significant is it?
Well, you as the late Governor Mario Cuomo always said, you govern in poetry, you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. And so very often, lots of things are said during the campaign, but when you reach government, there must be a consensus-building effort to ensure that all sides are heard and that a consensus is built to move forward. And I think this is what's happening. What's happening right now is that the president is realizing that there's currently 3 bills on the floor. There is the DREAM Act, which is a bipartisan piece of legislation that has over 200 co-sponsors. You have the Hurd-Aguilar bill, which is called the USA Act, which just emerged a few weeks ago. And you have the framework that was considered and put into place by the 6 senators, including Senator Graham and Senator Durbin and Menendez. And so these are the 3 rails that we must take to ensure that we discuss and reach a consensus, and we finally, once and for all, take care of all of these issues pertaining to the Dreamers.
And so on this issue of taking care of the Dreamers as part of the bill, the effort to keep the government running, right, to putting these two things together, Republican leadership tonight say they have the confidence that the stopgap that would keep the government open, that they have confidence they can get that done without resolving the Dreamer issue. What's your response to that?
Well, I voted against the CR last time, and I'm ready to vote against the CR again. And I see lots of members that really want to take care of this issue, because the public sentiment right now across the nation, over 80% of Americans feel that these young people should stay here. They like them. You look at their young faces and their energy and their feelings about America, and you grow to love them. And so 80% of Americans, whether they live on Republican districts or Democratic districts, want this resolved. And so I will be voting against any continuing resolution or a spending bill that doesn't have a resolution to the Dreamers Act.
So you just heard the White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, right, in an interview saying the president has evolved in his views on many things, including immigration. And you were with John Kelly today. And in that meeting, sources tell us that he said some of the president's campaign promises on immigration were uninformed. So the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, who sits there with the president every day, is admitting that his boss was uninformed. Is that what you heard?
I heard something to that effect. I'm not sure if there were exactly those words, but that was the tone of the discussion. And who pays for the wall is exactly one of those campaign promises. Mexico always said that they would not pay for the wall.
Right.
That was a campaign rhetoric that became very popular among his ranks, and he led the chants during the campaign stops in different cities across the states, and it almost became a reality. But all the time, Mexico said that it would not pay for the wall. And here we are, a year into his administration, and we realize now that Mexico is not paying for the wall.
Did you feel that Kelly, were you surprised at all that he seemed open to on some level, it sounds like clearly, criticizing his boss or admitting his boss didn't really know what was going on? Were you surprised to hear that from Kelly?
I'm glad that he was there, and I'm glad that he came, I think, a good faith effort to hear us out, to hear the Congressional Hispanic Caucus present our views on Dreamers, on enforcement and the wall and issues pertaining to immigration. And I think that he was genuine in coming before us and hearing us out. We presented the ideas that we had. As I said earlier, there are 3 tracks: the traditional DREAM Act, which I am a co-sponsor of, the Hurl and Aguilar, and also the framework that was developed by the Gang of 6 at the Senate. And so these are 3 real pieces of legislation that are on the table right now. We should not invent something new or throw toxic amendments that would only make it further difficult to reach a consensus.
All right, Congressman, I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Erin.
All right, and next, President Trump boasting about the results of his physical, saying it means he has the mental capacity to solve the North Korea problem when his predecessors did not. Plus, a top Republican senator compares Trump's rhetoric to Stalin's. Fair? And Steve Bannon's reported slip-up during a meeting with Russian investigators. What did he say?
In need of great talent for your business, but short on time? You don't have to get lost in a huge stack of resumes to find your perfect hire. You just need the right tools, smarter tools. It can be challenging finding great talent to make your business successful. ZipRecruiter posts your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards with just one click. Then ZipRecruiter actively looks for the most qualified candidates and invite them to apply. No wonder 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site in just one day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes and industries to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. And right now, listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/outfront. That's ZipRecruiter.com/outfront. One more time, to try it for free, go to ZipRecruiter.com/outfront.
Breaking news, President Trump bragging about being smarter than Presidents Obama, Clinton, and Bush. That's in a new interview tonight with Reuters. In it, he says it's the reason, frankly, that he will solve the North Korea crisis when they all 3 failed to do so. Singing his own praises about his perfect score on the cognitive test, the president said, quote, "I guess they all realized they were going to have to leave it to a president that scored the highest on tests." Out front now, the Reuters White House correspondent Aisha Roscoe, who spoke to the president. Aisha, you sat down with him today for 53 minutes, and I just shared one quote there that he gave you. He told you he's better equipped to deal with Kim Jong-un than the past presidents based on the results of that particular test his doctor gave him at his annual physical.
Well, he didn't specify that particular test. We had talked earlier about kind of the glowing report that he got from his doctor yesterday. But he said he scores the highest on tests, so it could have been the medical test, I don't know whether he was referring to his education or social tests, but he said that he scores the highest on tests, and so that's why the North Korea issue had to be left to him.
So in this conversation, you also pressed him on the bipartisan immigration meeting where S-hole comments were made. And I wanted just to read part of what he told you, Aisha. He said, quote, "I'm not going to get into what I said, but I will tell you it was a tough meeting. I love the people from Haiti. I campaigned. I went 2 or 3 times down to little Haiti in Miami." What else did he tell you? I mean, I think it's so crucial, Aisha. He did not deny at all. He did not try to deny what he said in that meeting.
He said he wouldn't go into it. We tried to get to what he actually said. He said he wouldn't talk about what he said in the meeting. And I did ask him specifically, did he think that the U.S. at this point is bringing in too many people from African countries or from Haiti? And he said that he doesn't want to focus on individual countries. He wants to focus on the individual. And as you said, that he loves Haiti and that he felt that, people from Haiti were good workers and that he had these campaign events and they were very warm to him. So that's what he said about that. But he also made clear that he hated the bipartisan deal that was brought to him and that he used tough language, but he wouldn't say what the tough language was.
Right. Even though, of course, in a tweet he tried to deny it. But I think it's obviously very significant that now when he had a chance in an interview to do so, he did not try to do that. Aisha, thank you so much. Aisha, as we said, spoke to the president today for 53 minutes. And out front now, our senior political reporter, Nia Malika Henderson, and former director of the Nixon Presidential Library, Tim Naftali. Okay, so it's interesting. He said the scores well on tests. As she points out, it could be any kind of test. Yeah. Obviously, he did the quote again. I guess they all realized they were going to have to leave it to the president. A president that scored the highest on tests. So that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and this is a president that likes to measure things, right? Be it the size of his hands, be it the size of the nuclear button that's on his desk, be it a test that he was given by his doctor about his cognitive ability, which really is a test to determine whether or not he had dementia or showed signs of dementia. So he brings that up in that interview. A pretty broad interview talking about any number of things. Obviously, this deal with or no deal around DACA and playing coy, right? In reading the interview and reading the articles that came out of it, in some ways, it felt like, has this president really been president for a year? I mean, he's sounding the sort of same notes, the same threats to North Korea, the same threats to China, and he still seems like he's kind of a bystander president, and he hasn't really taken office, and he's going to the same kind of vague, I'm not going to tell you if I've talked to the leader of North Korea, or maybe there'll be a war, maybe they won't be a war. So that was what struck me about it.
It's like a flirtation that he really likes to have. I mean, I just want to, again, tests. He used the word tests, plural. He did take an intelligence test last week, a cognitive assessment. Let me be clear. So I just want to give everyone a sample of the Montreal assessment. Here's some of the things you have to do. You have to connect the dots. You have to identify a lion, a rhinoceros, and a camel. And maybe you get extra points if you know it's a dromedary. The point that I am making here, in a funny way, I admit, is that this is not an intelligence test. Right. It is a test to determine if one has mild cognitive dysfunction, okay, or pre-dementia. That's just the reality. Although I will play for you, to Nia's point, he does love to talk about how smart he is.
Yes, he does. Listen, he is so good at the game of poker, international poker, that he has managed to make a man who ordered the murder of his stepbrother, Kim Jong-un, look reasonable. Donald Trump's policy has managed to make the North Korean regime look reasonable because of the steps it has taken to have a dialogue with South Korea. Now, that to me is not the sign of an intelligent American policy. And yet the president promises us that he's smarter than all of his predecessors and that he will figure out something that none of them has figured out up to now. It's dubious because he never gives us details. It's always these grand statements without detail.
And, to this point, when it came to Kim Jong-un, right, he would not say whether or not he's spoken to Kim Jong-un, as Aisha referred to. And he said, no, I just don't want to say as to whether or not we've had communication. But, okay, we'll see how this plays out. And hopefully it can be done in a peaceful way. But it's very possible that it can't. Now, this is very significant because he's had a giant fight for several days going on with the Wall Street Journal about whether he did or did not say that he probably has a good relationship with the leader of North Korea. So he has an opportunity today with Aisha to come out and say what he really thinks.
Yeah, but he
will not do it.
He wants to leave it out there and play coy and clever. And in the meantime, North Korea is closer to having a nuclear weapon that they can deliver to America's shores than they ever have been. You had Condoleezza Rice come out in an interview with David Axelrod and say that they are pretty clever to go to the Olympics, pretty clever in their approach to South Korea, pretty clever in really breaking up what had been in previous administrations kind of multilateral talks between North Korea and Japan, China and Russia. And so, I mean, he can sort of say all of these things and play coy. And in the meantime, Kim Jong-un is doing pretty well.
And Tim, he also, on the yes-hole countries, he had a chance here to either admit it and say he was sorry, which was, he doesn't apologize, so it wouldn't be consistent, but would have been the right thing to do, or to go ahead and double down on his tweet where he denied saying it, which of course wouldn't make sense at this point because we know what happened. But it was interesting that he chose to do neither. He chose to avoid it.
No, what he chose to do is to be confusing, because he ran promising that the United States would have a country-based immigration policy. Remember what he said about Mexico? Mm-hmm. Remember what he said about people from Muslim countries? Now he's saying he wants an immigration policy based on individual merit. That's something entirely new for him. That's not what he ran on. That would actually be a lot better for the United States. So it's not clear to me, and I don't think it's clear to a lot of people that are watching this, what the president's new immigration policy is, except that it's not a bipartisan compromise.
Right.
His hardline Republican allies have told him it's bad for business to do it. And I don't see what he wants instead of it.
And neither does Mitch McConnell.
Right, so and Mitch McConnell, who he needs to know in order to get it through Congress, has said publicly, which is a pretty strong admonishment, he doesn't know what the president's view is. All right, thank you both.
Thank
and
you.
next, one of the harshest attacks yet on the president from his own party.
An American president who cannot take criticism, who must constantly deflect and distort and distract, who must find someone else to blame, is charting a very dangerous path.
And more breaking news. Trump's chief of staff saying tonight the White House did not instruct Steve Bannon to invoke executive privilege with Russian investigators. Okay, so who's telling the truth and who isn't?
Support for OutFront comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. Rocket Mortgage is simple, allowing you to fully understand all the details and be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/outfront. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, and MLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
New tonight, a historic takedown of a U.S. president by a senator from his own party. Senator Jeff Flake ripping into President Trump on the Senate floor, comparing the president's rhetoric to that of Russian dictator Joseph Stalin, warning that Trump's daily attacks on the media and government institutions are putting American democracy at risk.
It is a testament to the condition of our democracy that our own president uses words infamously spoken by Joseph Stalin to describe his enemies. An American president who cannot take criticism, who must constantly deflect and distort and distract, who must find someone else to blame, is charting a very dangerous path.
Out front now, Bill Kristol, the Weekly Standard editor-at-large, and Brian Lanza, former communications director for President Trump's transition team. Thanks to both. Brian, Senator Flake making a very impassioned speech. Obviously, this is a point now of moral clarity for him. This is the second such speech that he has done. This one about the president's thin skin, his lies, his attacks on government agencies and the media. He says it's a threat to our democracy. Why is Jeff Flake so wrong?
Yeah, I think he's wrong because he's talking. First of all, let's talk about dictators. I mean, the president, dictators, the only dictators that Jeff Flake is familiar with are the Castro brothers in Cuba. He's been an apologist for the Cuba policy, and that is a real dictatorship. That is somebody who actually suppressed the free media. They didn't allow free speech to take place. They didn't allow religion to establishment. I mean, so the comparison is kind of, it's extreme, and Jeff's trying to get, the senator's trying to get attention. My understanding is he only had two people there, two other senators listening to him speak. He's trying to get attention. He's trying to use sort of the Trump model and say outrageous things so people pay attention to him, while the rest of D.C. is trying to actually solve the issues of the budget and DACA. It's just a distraction. We gave him his 15 minutes, and let's just move on from this at this point.
Bill?
I thought it was a good speech. I think Jeff Flake has been courageous. I wish he were staying in the Senate and we're running for re-election, and even if he lost, he lost. That's the only thing I mean, it's his decision, it's his life, and it's easy for me to sit here and say he should run, but I wish he had. I think, look, there are the Trump apologists, but then there are the serious people who are concerned about what Trump is doing to this country. And I guess the thing that occurs to me watching Senator Flake and talking to a lot of other people is it's really time to fight, I mean, a governor, let me just say one quick story. A governor called me yesterday. I don't really know him that well, but he called. He had seen something I had said about one of those immigrants who was being deported. I think it was from the Detroit airport. It got a lot of coverage. A guy who'd been here, I think, 30 years, wife, kids, totally law-abiding.
Yes.
Right. And he said, what can we do about this? And I said, you're a governor, and I don't know quite what we can do about this, but if you and other governors say this is an outrage, if you talk to your own police department, law enforcement departments and say, how can we stop this, go to your senators and congressmen and say what is going on, you can do something. So I'm a little tired, honestly, of elected officials saying, gee, Trump is really a bad guy, and then not acting in Congress to pass DACA or as governors to do what they can to really change things.
And, Brian, to this point, though, when you talk about comparisons to dictators, I want to ask you the point, though, about empowering them. When I have conversations with people overseas, sometimes there are some pretty crazy conspiracy theories thrown out there. And the first thing that they say to delegitimize reality sometimes is it's fake news. And the term fake news, we all know who thought of it, okay? The Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, recently said we're all living through a fake news era. The Venezuelan president, who obviously is rolling back democracy, blamed the global media for all kinds of false things, saying this is what we call fake news. And in Russia, Brian, the foreign ministry now has an entire website. I'll show it to you. An entire website. Look at it. A big fake on the top of it. And they just put stories they don't like on there. There's only one guy who came up with this branding and did this. Does that at all to you seem like a problem when people like those people are empowered by it?
It's very concerning. I mean, what you're talking about, there are communist, dictators who are suppressing individual freedoms, and that is very concerning to me as an American, to me as somebody.
Right, and they're doing it using Donald Trump's number one excuse.
I'm uncomfortable with it. I mean, I'm not going to argue anything differently. But at the end of the day, what the president is doing here in the U.S. matters a little bit more than, sort of the interpretation of his words in the international community. And he is fighting to change Washington, D.C. I mean, there's a power structure that has left a vast majority of America behind, and he's fighting to represent those people. And he's criticizing the media. Nobody's free of criticism. I mean, CNN makes mistakes.
Okay, but he's not just criticizing
Trump
the media.
Makes mistakes.
He criticizes anything he doesn't like or any time he's criticized, which I think is the point Jeff Flake was making. Bill.
No, I'm not going to agree. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, no, I mean, the criticism is fine. The media can take care of themselves. They're big institutions, most of them. But what about a week ago in an interview, the President of the United States says that these two FBI agents who had texted things that weren't so flattering to him are traitors. He used that word, traitors. The President of the United States calling individuals traitors. That's something that we have not experienced in our time. Joe McCarthy did it and was eventually censured for doing so. It's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable kind of abuse of rhetoric and dangerous. I mean, you don't really want people calling other people in the government traitors when there's no charges against them. Trump, incidentally, these people work for the FBI, whose director is appointed by President Trump. If they're really traitors in the FBI, maybe they should go after them. But he just throws around these terms. And in that respect, I agree with what Erin's implying. It does do damage to us that he uses terms in this way.
And, Brian, I want to get back to this point, though. Doesn't he bear some responsibility for the fact that dictators around the world and closed governments that don't allow for open elections are now using his term to demean and deride and dismiss every kind of story that they don't like?
I mean, dictators are always going to use something that the American president does. You know, dictators took advantage of the fact that President Obama had a lead from behind foreign policy, which allowed them to be very aggressive in their approaches. Look at what happened with Russia and Ukraine. So dictators are always going to be very aggressive towards whatever American president
Brian, you got to admit, this is different. This is any conversation I have with someone overseas. When they don't like something they're hearing, they just throw fake news. And then that has become intellectually enough for people to say, I no longer have to consider it. I no longer have to think about it. I no longer have to deal with it. This is not something we have ever seen before. And it is empowering people who are not open to ideas in their own societies.
I just don't see that the blame relies on President Trump. I mean, you're talking about dictators who leverage every piece of advantage they have to keep their countries under power and expand their powers. They would have done this under Hillary Clinton. They clearly did it under Obama. They did it under Bush. This is just what dictators do. They use whatever they can to divide and to sort of expand their powers. It doesn't, you know, we need to be proactive in how we address what the dictators do, how to open up the press, how to open up more freedoms in these countries. I think we need to be very proactive, and I think that's where America has always been sort of the beacon to that. The language that the president uses and that these dictators are sort of, you know, clinging on to is uncomfortable, but that just means we need to double our efforts over there. And you know, there is an issue with the media sort of being inconsistent with the truth. I think we've seen last year of that, where people have come up with these anonymous whispers, who are anonymous sources, saying that these things are happening, and there's no way to refute it. You know, the president gives a statement, says this didn't happen, and yet he's stuck having to respond to anonymous statements or anonymous whispers for saying this actually did happen.
Or let's just take asshole, not anonymous and multiple source, and he himself is now no longer denying what he had denied on Twitter. So I would ask you, who's telling the truth in this case? Well, the truth problem very clearly in this country, we have one in the White House. And I think anyone who would dispute that has an issue, whether you're a defender of his or not.
This bothers me to say, but I also think we have a truth problem in the media. I mean, conservatives have been talking about this for a very long time. It's now an issue where it's sort of now hit the mainstream thing. There is a problem with the truth in the media, and it's not the specific things that they're saying, it's how they tailor their specific messaging. And I think that's the problem, and that gives Trump and his supporters the oxygen to say fake news. Because the middle America is focused on different things. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Bill, I just want to the point that Brian's making. Jeff Flake today obviously said that some of the words Trump uses compared it to Stalin, who, of course, killed tens of millions of people in the gulags. Ronna McDaniel, the chair of the Republican National Committee, responded to the senator in part saying, comparing the leader of the free world to murderous dictators is absurd. You've gone too far. Does she have a point, or was Jeff Flake right? Bill?
Well, he was, I think, technically right about the use of the term, but look, freedom has been rolled back across the world. I think President Obama wasn't helpful on this. Freedom House, the bipartisan organization, put out a study, and Donald Trump's not helping in that. He's not fighting for human rights, incidentally, around the world. He likes dictators. He justifies dictatorships. Those seem to be the foreign leaders he gets along with best in China and Russia, Philippines, and elsewhere. So I wish we had a president who fought hard for human rights around the world. The media, there are lots of reporters, there are lots of media outlets. Some do better, some do worse. There's only one president. He has to be held to a higher standard than a bunch of honestly reporters, and I say this as someone who edits a magazine. If Donald Trump, if the President of the United States can't hold himself to a higher standard than a huge number of reporters and media, then we have a big problem.
All right, I will leave it there. Thank you both very much for a great conversation. And next, breaking news, the White House said it would cooperate with the Russia probe. So why is it now working behind the scenes to limit testimony to investigators? We have some breaking details this hour. And despite the very rosy report from the White House doctor, the president does have heart disease. And Dr. Sanjay Gupta joins us with the new details. Breaking news, the White House working behind the scenes to limit the testimony to congressional investigations into the Russia investigation. This is according to multiple sources. The strategy becoming clear yesterday when President Trump's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, refused to answer multiple questions about the transition in the White House, citing executive privilege. Amazing, though, because moments ago, Trump's chief of staff denied that Bannon was told to do that.
Did the White House tell him to invoke executive privilege? No.
Steve has had very, very little contact with the White House since he left. He left the White House and has certainly never returned to the White House, and with the exception of a few phone calls here and there, very, very little contact with the White House. And I certainly have never spoke to him since he left.
Sarah Murray is out front. Sarah, what is going on here?
Well, Erin, we've certainly asked the White House for more details, but it looks a little bit like a game of semantics here. I mean, maybe he's saying that they didn't speak directly to Steve Bannon. Instead, there were conversations with Steve Bannon's lawyer. Or maybe he's saying that the White House hasn't officially asserted executive privilege. But here is what we do know, that Steve Bannon was behind closed doors. He was testifying for nearly 6 hours. And throughout that testimony, he took breaks. And while they were taking breaks, his lawyer would confer via telephone with the White House counsel's office about what Steve Bannon was allowed or not allowed to say, and would come back with the guidance that Bannon could not talk about anything that had to do with the transition or anything that had to do with his tenure in the White House. And in fact, when Sarah Sanders, the press secretary, was answering questions about Bannon's appearance today, she didn't dispute the notion that these phone calls were going back and forth. Instead, she said it was totally normal for that to be happening. Take a listen.
That's the same process that is typically followed. Sometimes they actually have a White House attorney present in the room. This time it was something that was relayed via phone, and again was following standard procedure for an instance like this.
So what we know is that the White House has been working behind the scenes to limit what some of these witnesses will talk about when they go behind closed doors. But, you know, it kind of remains unclear what happens next in all of this. We did see Corey Lewandowski. He was on the Hill today when he was asked, again behind closed doors, about anything that had to do with his time since leaving the presidential campaign. He punted, but he said that he was unprepared to answer the committee's questions. The White House's view of this is they're doing nothing wrong, that they're simply maintaining precedent. Democrats see it as an effort to muzzle important witnesses. One thing about Steve Bannon's appearance, he certainly left that room infuriating lawmakers on both sides of the aisle.
Right. Something, the rare thing to unify them on that particular committee. Sarah, thank you so much. Out front now, the former special assistant to Robert Mueller, Michael Zeldin. And so, Michael, let me just ask you, Sarah's reporting the White House is working behind the scenes to limit the testimony that anybody's going to give to congressional investigators. Are they fully cooperating here or not?
Well, it seems that they are cooperating with Mueller and not so much with the congressional committees. And they face the same sort of ability to be charged with lying or obstruction of justice for their failure to cooperate with the committee. So I don't exactly understand why they would do this dual strategy, but that's sure what it looks like from the reporting we have had tonight.
Right. As you point out, the repercussions would be the same. So it doesn't seem to fully make sense. I mean, you know, today, Corey Lewandowski, the former campaign manager for Trump, also was in front of the House Intelligence Committee. And as Bannon had tried to do, he also refused to answer a slew of questions. In his case, though, Michael, he said he was not prepared. I mean, right. He knew this date was coming. He's going to Washington. He's going in front of a group of people who are investigating collusion in the Russia investigation and Russian interference in the election. And he says he's not prepared?
Right. I used to try that in the 6th grade, but Mr. Coron would never accept that as an excuse for my not having done my homework. It's just not really acceptable to have an answer from Corey Lewandowski, who has been on the news forever and a day saying that he's going to fully cooperate, he's got a story to tell, and that this is, you know, something he's looking forward to. And now coming in with some claim of spurious claim of executive privilege or the dog ate my homework and I'm not prepared to testify. It just... Alice in Wonderland, you know, Alice's Adventure in Wonderland, curiouser and curiouser is the only way that it makes sense to me.
No, it does seem like Alice in Wonderland. It doesn't make sense. It all comes back to, really, if there's nothing to see here, then just put all of your laundry out. Thank you very much, right. Michael. And next, the White House getting very defensive today about the president's health after a test shows the president has heart disease. And yet another public office seat long held by Republicans, just won by a Democrat, this in Wisconsin. Is it part of a nationwide trend or not? Tonight, the White House defensive after a medical test showed the president has heart disease. This after a very rosy description by the White House doctor about the president's health in a nearly 1 hour long press conference yesterday. Here's White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders today.
He is the only doctor that has weighed in on this matter, that has actually examined the president. And so I think a doctor that has spent the amount of time with the president, as Dr. Jackson has, is not only the most qualified, but the only credible source when it comes to diagnosing any health concerns.
CNN chief medical correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta is out front. And Sanjay, so tell us about the test results, the ones that focus specifically on heart disease.
Yeah, I mean, there were several types of tests to try and parse out evidence of problems with the heart. Cholesterol tests, we know his cholesterol, for example, has gone up despite being on medication. We know about his weight, which can also be a predictor for heart problems. The one that sort of came out in questioning is a test known as coronary calcium test. And basically what that's looking for is evidence of plaque and narrowing in the blood vessels that lead to the heart. That's heart disease. As I mentioned, it wasn't part of the official record. It only came out when I asked Dr. Jackson about it. Listen to how it was described.
He does not have heart disease. No.
He had a CT scan before that showed calcium in his coronary blood vessels.
He does. He did. He had I think so. Technically, he has non-clinical atherosclerotic coronary atherosclerosis, and so that's been mentioned in previous physical exams he's had done. He had a coronary calcium score done in 2009. It was 34. He had a coronary calcium score done in 2013 that was 98. And then we did get a calcium score from this one. I didn't mention it because I think it was clinically good information. It wasn't, but it was 133.
That 133 number, Erin, important. Much of the literature and people who've studied this say anything over 100 suggests evidence of heart disease. Even under 100 can be mild heart disease. You heard the doctor there saying it's not heart disease, but the president has coronary atherosclerosis. That's heart disease. That's what that is. And to be fair, most men over the age of 40, myself included, probably have some evidence of heart disease. It's very common, so not at all unexpected that President Trump, who's 71 years old, has some heart disease, and there's evidence of it.
Is there anything unusual about having that test done? Obviously, the doctor had, he mentioned it when you brought it up and gave the results. But not only did he have it done last week, but he also had it done at least 2 times from 2009 on.
Yeah, I mean, usually you get the test because somebody's got enough concern to say, look, let's look for heart disease. There's enough of a concern because of cholesterol levels, because of lifestyle, whatever it may be. So as you point out, 9 years ago was the first time he had this test done. And at that time, the number was in the 30s. 4 years later, it went up into the 90s. And now it's in the 130